glad you could join us on FM After Hours, the ultimate podcast for all things facility management. We're here to take you on a journey into the ever-changing world of FM. Don't forget to check out our gracious sponsor, Remediate, your trusted partner in fire and life safety compliance, and Granger, for the ones who get it done. And with that, let's dive in.
Good evening, guys, and welcome back. It's Mickey with the FM After Hours show. I'm joined by Art Huber, Kirk Kaiser. In our last episode, we spent a good hour talking about construction and healthcare. And there's so much to talk about, we're going to do a part two. Before I kick it over to Kirk, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Remediate and Granger. Thanks, Kirk.
All right. So, yeah. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Hey.
Good to see you again.
Exactly.
Good to see you out there.
Yeah. Art's wearing his I'm an Influencer shirt again. Yep. What do you got on, Mickey?
This is the shirt I got when I visited Mackinac Island.
Ah,
Yeah.
nice.
I get more comments on this shirt. I usually wear it when I travel, and people just, you've been to Mackinac Island? No, I've never been. I just got a shirt.
Art, when you wear that shirt traveling, what do you get?
People just, wow.
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 They don't recognize you just right off the bat?
No, I have to explain it. They want to know what the heck they're talking about.
All right. So we're going to continue on with this construction path. All right. So last time, we spent, a decent amount of time, you started introing the topic and really Art was talking about, it's just a thick topic, right?
Yeah.
Like there's so much and you could spend so much time. So, and one of the things like you touched on and, had a couple of people ask is what are some resources that are out there? So you mentioned like ASHI, you mentioned, specifically within them, even like PDC, are there courses people can go take? Or is there, what other resources would you recommend for people out there to get more knowledgeable on this subject?
Well, one thing I think we mentioned last time, I'm almost sure I did, about Project Management Institute.
Yeah.
Now, if you're really going to get into the construction side of the business, that would be a great resource to establish that, let's call it mechanism that is very popular in the construction industry on how to manage a project. I don't know a better way to say that because it's project management. It's like, but that is and they have online courses that you can go through this process to become certified as a Project Management Institute. And I think we have a couple people we know that have done it. And I warn you, once you do it, then everything you ask, you always say, okay, what's the charter?
Yeah. It'll drive you crazy.
But that's a great resource, and it's available. We mentioned ASHI, we always do. I'm thinking that the AIA has a series of, let's call it classes or conferences like PDC has for ASHI and other things. But AIA, you're going to be working with architects.
Okay.
It's really great to understand their world. And AIA has all kinds of opportunities to learn. And I think I've thrown this out there a long time ago in one of our podcasts. The American College of Healthcare Executives, ACHE is what I always refer to it as, but they have a program of various levels you can achieve, all the way to fellow. But they also provide, and it's really for administrators, supposedly, but the information they provide in their sessions where you get credits so you can go move up the chain and become a fellow at the American College of Healthcare Executives. There's a lot of stuff in there that you can learn on the process of getting it through the organization. That we were talking mostly on how to get it done, but this is how to get it approved and how to frame it for the administrators you're going to be talking to. You go to those, you're kind of talking, all those people are there, and you can hear them talk about what they expect. So that's kind of cool too.
Yeah.
Do you know anybody that's a fellow?
Oh, shut up.
Art's a fellow.
I've expired.
I'm gonna go a little bit different direction. Number one, find a mentor, right? And you can do that through ASHI, through PDC. Find a mentor. There's nothing like being able to call somebody or sit down and have a cup of coffee with somebody and say, hey, here's what I'm faced with. What say you, right? The second thing is also do an honest assessment of your own skills. So when I came into the first time I had a major hospital system to run, and I'll never forget the conversation that we had. So my first few years my first 6 years in facilities was, working at the tech level, the lead level, the supervisor level, right? I became a director for Sodexo. I traveled around the country, and I went in and I fixed things and then left. Well, I went to Wichita to become a director of facilities, and I remember him telling me it's a whole different world when you have to fix it and live with it, right? And he was right. I hate to say it, but he was right, because you put something in place. It sounds great when you're talking about it, but when you actually put it in place, and you're trying to get people to change their behavior, you're going to screw some things up and you're going to have to make some adjustments. And so you have to make those adjustments and then you have to live with it. One of the things that I realized early on was I had a deficiency in mechanical knowledge. And mechanical systems are very complex. They can be very simple, but they can also be very complex. And so I had a mechanical engineer that I really liked. He was an older guy. He was very smart. He was very abrupt. You ask him a question. That's a dumb question, but I kind of like that kind of stuff because it's like we're not dicking around, right? Mm-hmm. And so he's passed away, but I actually paid him by the hour, like 4 hours a month, to come in and just teach me, right? And what we would do is, because you have different type systems throughout your facility, we just went to the type of system and he would say, okay, tell me how this works and what's this doing, right? And then so not only then are you learning about your hospital, but you're learning details that you may not, because I'm not an engineer, right? So that's another way to get knowledge, is actually pay for it. Find somebody who's an expert in it and set aside some money and dedicate yourself. Because, he would give me homework and I'd had to do the homework, and, he'd be like, go over to the P building and look at this system that was installed in 1987. And, based on what we've learned, tell me what it means. And I'd go over there like, I have no idea. Then I'd go get art. What is this? But by doing that, you gain a greater knowledge. And that helps in construction too, because when you're talking about doing a construction project and you're touching the P building, you say, hey, I like where your head's at, but remember this about that system, right? So
there's a system there sometimes,
right,
that they didn't even realize when you're like doing the bid and you're telling mechanical contractors, oh, you're working in the P building. Oh, by the way, it's this 1987 installed system you're going to deal with, so make sure your bid includes that. That's more knowledge than you can have when you have a couple million square feet of building and you're there a couple years. You got to be there a lifetime to know everything about a building that size.
Right.
But I would take it a step further, or maybe not as in depth with one individual, but get a group of individuals that you have some trust or relationships with. One architect, one mechanical, one general contractor, owner of a company. And, they love to take, you golfing or out to lunch or whatever, because they think they're going to get business out of you if they do that. But it never worked with me that way. What got me the business with them is trusting them, because they would, give me information when I was asking them about something, or at that lunch or whatever, talking about our project or whatever. That to me was as good as it was for, with Richard, yeah. Richard, I knew Richard too. And the great thing about Richard is you could call him up and ask him a question because he knew your building. He was a designer that was involved in so much of what was in that building. So it was really a great resource to have when you had a problem. You just got to call him and ask him a question. And there's no cost to that. He's going to give you an answer. And that kind of relationships you can have with any of these vendors, whether they're mechanical contractors or architects or owners of companies. They love talking to you because they want that relationship. They've been taught, have a relationship with that person at that organization. But I'm building something that's going to give me all kinds of information when I need it. Because you're never going to know everything. It's just impossible.
A cool story about Richard. So, we had put the engineers, we'd chosen the 3 to 5 engineers, right? And he worked for this engineering company, and we'd done a project, and there was a problem. We didn't have enough airflow in an area, right? And this will lead you to commissioning. Yep. What you never want to do is pay the people who are doing the work to do the commissioning because you're basically
Oh yeah.
right. So we had a problem, and the GC was in there, the architect was in there, Richard was in there, and we're going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and it's always tense because nobody wants to admit anything. They're always trying to, well, this was a pre-existing condition. What are we supposed to do? And I've never seen this happen before or since, where Richard's he's just looking at the drawings and he's hitting his calculator, and he was a very severe man. Like just his mannerisms was just, and so he's doing this and he's doing that, and he goes, hold on a damn minute, and everybody stops and looks, and he goes, it's my fault. I'm like, what? And he goes, I undersized the motor. And okay, you guys leave. You leave, right?
You're excused.
You leave, right? And so Richard and I are sitting there, and I'm literally befuddled because I don't know where to go from here. And so I'm like, okay, Richard, what do we do? And he's like, well, he goes, I have to go back to the contract because it always says something about, what you do in these type of situations. But essentially what happened was I think they split the cost of the motor, and whatever it was, they went way over what I thought they were supposed to do, because I went to him and said, do we have the right to make him pay for the motor and the installation because he made a mistake? And you really don't, because
You got back to contracts.
yeah, you're back to contracts. But they went further, much further than they had to. They actually came out of pocket with some money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So after that, I pulled the contractors together and said, he's my mechanical on every project.
Well, that's what I say. You listen to our listeners out there. Why did he do that? Why did they do that? Because they wanted that long-term relationship with our organization.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they had just said, well, the contract says blah, blah, well, then he'd been just another contractor for in the future, because they filed the contract, wouldn't have held anything against him, but wouldn't have had any great feelings about it either.
Yeah.
But
And he didn't have to do that either. He could have just let it go, because nobody else would have been able to figure that out, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have another mechanical engineer that could sit there and go through everything, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, so in your day-to-day world, when you run across people that exhibit integrity, and those are the people that you want to spend time with. Those are the people you want to learn from,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And I know we talked about this when we had that nice interchange about insourcing and outsourcing. But when we did insourcing, we many times would bring in the contractor that was doing the outsourcing at the time and ask them to train us on how to do it. And by far the majority would do it, because they still knew that we're going to need them. But there were others that wouldn't.
Yeah.
And, it's okay, we'll figure it out. See you later. But that process develops the relationships that can serve you very, very well for the long haul, and specifically in construction.
Yeah.
I mean, construction is tough. I mean, it's never perfect, because the systems they're working on are always older. I mean, you run into stuff that nobody even knows how it works, because everyone died that ever worked on the stuff before. And so those relationships become critical.
So go ahead.
No, you go. Sorry.
I was going to switch up gears, but
Just
something
real
else.
quick,
Yeah.
on construction is tough, and I'm not in it on a day-to-day anymore. But an example of what might happen to you is you go through the budgetary process. You go through the board approval process. You get contracts. So let's say that takes 4 or 5 months, 6 months, right?
It can take forever.
And now the GC that you've picked comes to you and says, hey, there's all these tariffs now, and the price of steel just went up, whatever, right? And you're like, oh, shit. Right? And that's not something you can just say, that's your problem, right? That you have to work that out.
Yeah.
And that can...
And that's in the contracts.
Yeah.
Back to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not responsible for changes in the environment like that they couldn't control.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, I'm going to tell an opposite story. I know I'm going to change gears
You're
on
good.
this real quick.
Go
but
ahead.
One of the biggest projects I've ever done, well, actually, it's the most fun project I ever did, was building a new hospital. And we were bidding this hospital project in 2007. Now, if anybody out there recalls 2007, like inflation and everything, cost of copper, cost of asphalt, cost of everything was just going through the roof. It was crazy. So
Changing daily.
changing daily, and my
Yeah.
contractors were like hairs on fire because I got to give you a price that you're going to take to the board, because we were getting ready to take it to the board. So I think we come up with $110 million hospital we're going to build. And of course, I'm sitting there in front of the board along with my CEO and saying, hey, this is the price of things today. We got to pull the trigger on this. Otherwise we're going to get a GMP, which means we're locking this into these contractors, and away we go. Well, we got the price. I think it was 110 million. We ended up, because then 2008 hit, we ended up building it for like 95 million. So I was a hero.
Yeah, I remember that. I didn't understand it at the time, right? And I hated the GMP. I understand it now, but at the time I hated it because I felt like we're just letting these guys slide, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm arguing with him just between him and I. I'm like, don't let him get away with that. And he's like, hey, dummy, look at this. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Man. All right, I'm going to throw out some just different things and just give me your feedback on it, right? So, own space versus lease space. What when you hear that, right? What does your mind and sort of initially go to as far as managing the construction process, how it's going to be different, things you should think about?
Well, when own space, I don't have any thoughts different than what we
Right,
were talking
that's
about.
what we've been talking about for
Right,
most.
lease space,
Yep.
it's all about back to the lease.
Yeah.
What are your rights?
Okay.
Because regardless of what the rights say in the lease,
Mm-hmm.
first you know that, but then you go to the owner who you're leasing from if you want to do something different and negotiate into whatever you want to do, because you got a building that's got systems that you're not involved in at all. You're not managing them. You're not maintaining them, the air handlers and all that stuff that you're going to be tying into. So there's all kinds of complexities around that when you're renovating lease space. So you're working with somebody that doesn't want to spend a dollar.
Right.
They don't want any liability. They don't want anything to happen around them. All the tenants around them that you can't mess
Well,
with.
it's in mixed use. Then
Mixed,
that's different.
you have mixed use or even all healthcare. It doesn't even matter.
Right.
You're going to be affecting one of his tenants.
Or mixed tenants. I'm sorry.
Right.
Like
yeah,
where you
mixed
got-
tenants, right?
yeah,
I mean,
yep.
so up, down, sides,
Yep.
all these people that
Yeah.
you're going to affect. That's what goes through my mind is
Yeah.
it's very different in
Yeah.
that regard. But because you're doing healthcare anyway, and you've done it in the hospitals, you still have all the people on the sides and that you're managing it
Right.
through. It's just that they're not part of you.
Right. So if you take that building, right, and let's take the mixed tenant, and you've got your set of requirements that you have to live up to, right? Well, how does that extend beyond the envelope that you have when there's other tenants and other spaces and stuff, and you're having to, manage things a certain way with humidity and airflow all the way down to, the fire protection and everything else, right? So how do you broach that? Because first of all, nobody else really cares about you, right? But now do you have to take into account the whole building, or is it just your space within the building, or how do you tend to look at that then?
It so much depends.
Right.
I mean, I've run into situations where it doesn't matter whatsoever because no one's ever going to look at the space outside of the local, fire marshal and the local plumbers, and they get the permits, and nobody cares about healthcare. Joint Commission's never going to be in there because it's a outpatient facility that doesn't get inspected. It's just something that you list on your facilities that you have places, but they don't inspect it. They don't look at it. Then all of a sudden you get into one where, it's a surgical center or something like that, and they're going to want to go in
Anesthesia
there. And all these other things start happening. So you got to look at all that of how much you want to get into the overkill. Because like we talked about somebody earlier that she might look at it and want to control it like it's part of the hospital. And we're battling about it doesn't matter.
Right.
None of this matters. We're going to have the right airflow. We're going to have all that, but we don't have to do all this extra special stuff because it's outside. It's not ours. And we just need to maintain the space within our own space. We don't care about their fire pump. We don't care about their generator. But she wants all that in control because what's in her mind is the
So
hospital.
you don't have to manage those
it
things in
depends.
egress and everything.
It depends.
Yeah. So what I was going to say is the best scenario is that you're there before the lease is written, and you write the lease and negotiate the rates in a way where you're still responsible for the things that you care about from a maintenance standpoint, right? So if there was a fire pump then there's going to be a fire alarm system, right? We're going to take care of that. It's going to be a part of our program. You're your lease rate's going
Nice.
to cost you a little more.
Mm-hmm.
If you get, and I've been there, we've been there. It was I'm trying to think the type of space. It was like a hospice space that we had. It was like on the 7th floor, and it was terrible because they didn't maintain.
Oh, you're talking within the hospital that we
Yeah.
leased out to somebody.
Yeah, we leased out to somebody, and they didn't maintain it,
No.
and we had all sorts of problems.
Right. The Joint Commission came through and started walking through, and they asked them about how you were managing this stuff, and they go, "Well, we don't do anything." And
Yeah.
they go, this is not good. That didn't go well, but we fixed it.
And the way we fixed it is we flipped it.
Yeah.
Right, you don't worry about that. That's what we do.
Yeah, we do it.
And yeah,
Sure.
Yeah.
but you can't. I mean, sometimes you get into a situation where they don't care, and they're not gonna let you flip it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
Yeah, in that case, they were happy as hell to let us flip it because they didn't know what to do with all that stuff. And
Right.
they were the ones being inspected,
Mm-hmm.
and they were asking us for documentation on their stuff, and we fixed it. But it was like, okay, we know how to manage this one going forward,
right.
because otherwise it's a mess. But if it's not in your space, you can't. There have been so many. I mean, with him being a Joint Commission surveyor and running into this stuff, is you can't just say, well, that's the landlord's problem.
Right.
Yeah.
You just can't do that. You said you're supposed to somehow manage the landlord managing
Yeah.
the fire pump and the generator. If you're saying it's that kind of a facility,
Mm-hmm.
the ideal is say it's not that kind of facility.
Yeah.
That's the way to fix
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah, I'm if I go into your space as a surveyor and you have a fire alarm system, I'm asking for the fire alarm inspection reports.
Mm-hmm.
If you have fire doors, I'm asking for the fire door inspection report. I'm gonna ask, is this
and I just say it's the
Pertinent.
landlord's.
yeah? And then I'm like, no, that's not good, right? You got to show it to me, and it's his problem, right? I'm not gonna. Now I might give him some advice and say, hey, after I leave, you're gonna want to flip this around if you can,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, now most of the time, I don't know. I think most people do. If they know something has to be done, I think they do it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Everybody knows.
Well, it's usually that they didn't know is the
Yeah.
problem.
Right.
This I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
And then in construction, other than the occupants being unhappy, most of the time construction in that type of space is pretty simple. Again, because you're talking about clinic type space, it's not as complicated. You probably don't have
Business occupancy.
Yeah. You probably don't have medical gases. I mean, you could, but yeah, it just
Bariatric.
right. So
Surgeries and stuff like
So how
that.
about that? How about the little, the little emergency centers, little standalone clinics, stuff like that? Is it you treat all those the same way, or is those just
Well, if they're under the hospital's Joint
Joint
Commission,
Commission, mhm.
it's then you're treating it like part of the hospital,
yeah.
depending on its occupancy again.
Well, where I was going a different direction. Maybe I misunderstood the question. We did have, so we had sort of a contractors that worked on the acute side, and then we had approved contractors that worked on the MOB side,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I don't know, mostly because you don't want to pay the same rates.
All right.
It's not the same environment. There are requirements that you have to follow, but it's not as complicated.
Right. In one case, we had an entire organization that managed our rented facilities that we didn't have to do because that was under a different arm of the system.
Mm-hmm.
They kept it out of the higher cost mechanisms that we had to deal with. Now, some of that times the swords crossed and
Yeah.
we got issues, but we had to fix those internally more than externally.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. And you're talking about their maintenance guys are making. Now this was a while back, but they're making $13 an hour, and our guys are making $18-19 an hour. Right. So in some ways, you get what you pay for.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Same
Yeah.
thing with construction.
Yep. So, obviously when you start out with a new facility, you have this beautiful set of plans, of which the life safety plans.
Where are you living?
I said when you just start out. and you have these code sheet sets and stuff, and there's a section in there that's life safety plans, right? And that's obviously critical moving forward, right? Is to keep
Let
and
me correct
maintain
you.
those. Come on.
I built a brand new hospital and still never had all that to start with because I'm assuming our audience is educated or at least doing this work, and you do anything, going back to the project, any construction project, you start out with a set of plans that were drawn by an architect to be done this way. And then they start marking it up as builts. And those as builts, unless you write it in your contract, and then even then it's like pulling teeth to get those as builts converted into a final document that you can have.
Right.
Because normally what you end up is a set of documents the architect drew, and then a set of documents the contractor turns over you that are marked up. And then somehow you're supposed to put those two together in what you're saying is
and
that
then
final nice.
Put in another thing. 4 years down the road, you've changed the uses of rooms, you've redone stuff, right? And so
nobody changes use of rooms.
Yeah, exactly. See a little look over there. That never happened.
No, never.
Now it's a storage room.
Yeah,
exactly. So with that, like that is the battle, trying to keep plans current, right? Because in theory, that's what you give to contractors to say, hey, this is the elements of fire and life safety that you need to maintain and keep. Well, if they're not right, then it's hard for them to keep and maintain those elements, right? I mean, if you change the use of a room from to a soiled closet, then all of a sudden you're supposed to have a fire rating around it, right? Well, if those don't make it on the plans, then how does it, when the contractor goes to poke a hole in the wall, he's like, well, this is not rated, right?
Yeah, no problem.
So that just perpetuates it downstream. So maybe just talk about that.
Well, I think we talked about this.
We touched on it, but
way
just in the
back at the
in the in the vein of how you would do it today, right? Like, man, like you said, right when the project's done, I don't have a good accurate set, right?
Well,
is that just what you deal with, or is there a way to manage it?
Our approach has been in those contracts we talk about, in those set drawing or on set diagrams that we create and hand off to those architects and the contractors. In there is you will provide at the end of the project a set of documents that are final. You will redraw them to match the as-builts. It doesn't happen as easily as I just said it, because there's as-builts are all over the place, from different generals to the subcontractors marking up drawings, getting it back to the architect, and the architect said, "Well, I never really contracted for all this." I said, "You signed this document, said you would provide as-builts." Especially the life safety part of it, because that's what we really want. I mean, some of the other stuff is ridiculous. I mean, they're not showing you exactly where the pipe is anyway. It might be there then instead of there, and that's what all the argument is. But those life safety drawings are final at the end of a project, and if there's any changes, they're updated, and we have we give them a set to start with, supposedly that we have that are right, and that's the whole complication.
And there's a couple of you have methods of enforcement, right? So first of all, if you have your system set up where they're a qualified contractor, and you've got your contract written where they can't wiggle out of it, right? Hey, it's in the contract, and by the way, if you don't do this, next year you won't be one of our vendors, right? Our contractors. We did face situations where, for whatever reason, we agreed, or either they were bad actors and we weren't going to use them anymore, or we agreed that it was such a mess that we're like, okay, we're just going to hire another company to come in and fix this and give us the drawings, right? And then we'll just charge it back to the construction project. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you're making that contractor pay for it, but and when you're building your budgets, you have contingency line items and things like that. But it is important that whatever you need to do, that when you finish that project, you have an accurate set of drawings, especially life safety drawings. And on the facility side, you need an accurate set of electrical drawings and mechanical drawings. Like, that's important, because when you have a problem, you're gonna go back to your drawings. How is this supposed to operate?
What was the design intent?
What was the design intent before you start doing a bunch of crazy shit to solve problems? Closing valves, removing things, adding things, and now you've taken the entire system and it's off. I'm going to cut into here, I'm going to tie a piece of ductwork here, I'm going to run it over here, and I'm going to drop it down so you got your new office has air conditioning.
Yay.
And you just created down the line 17 problems, right? So All that's important, and you got to push your way through it. If you're in a situation where you don't have the system set up and you don't have the contract the right way and you don't have the relationship with the contractor, you just made your life difficult. You can still fight through it. It's just more complicated.
And the only success I've ever had there's always a relationship part that sometimes will resolve some of it. They'll take care of it because of the relationship and they want to keep it going. But the hard one, the one that always is where you get in the legal battle at the end is the, final payments. The contingency or the
punch list and commissioning.
Retainage. You're keeping depending on how you wrote your contract, you should be keeping anywhere from a 5 to 10% retainage on those projects, and that can be a lot of money, and you're not going to pay that unless they fulfill all of the elements of their contract until they close out and the final sworn statements and all that stuff come in. And then that's when you hold that up and saying, I didn't get my drawings.
Yeah, that's true.
That's not finished. Or whoever is responsible, they're not getting their payment. That gets ugly if that's the way you're trying to enforce it, because then there's all kinds of stuff happening where, the architect probably has a sworn statement that says everything was done. And, all this messy stuff can happen and there's so much going on. I mean, I'd love to say I'm sitting there watching one project be done and everything's, clicking off everything as I go. And that's the only thing I have to do in my life.
Yeah.
I'm distracted by 1,000 other things, and I'm saying, okay, you're good. Yeah, check, go, check, yeah, good. And then get to the project, go, what is this? These are not final drawings or whatever. And then that's usually where the last problem happens, is that you're getting to turnover and you get this pile of rolled up documents and going,
right,
what is this?
Yeah.
That's an interesting point he made in terms of, if you're building a $110 million hospital, it's easy to say I need a dedicated resource, right? But if you're doing 40 projects that range from $50,000 to $5 million, it's difficult to understand.
Why can't you just manage that?
Right, because the steps, almost all the steps are there, right? And you have to go through them or you have a mess.
Well, to your point, and this is one of my other questions, and that is, so let's say you built it right, you got your accurate set of as-built back right. Now you have all these further downstream projects that are just going to happen, right? So when you get that deliverable from the architect, is it just a PDF or is it a DWG file? Who owns it? And then if you go downstream and use a different architect or a different contractor, how do you make it so you get what you want and everybody plays nice? And
back to your contracts again.
Okay.
If you're doing everything we're saying, and again, we didn't cover all the details, but one of the contracts is with the architect, and in that architect contract is how they are to deliver the drawings. Not format is one thing, like DWG, like what
a CAD file.
What CAD are they using?
Yep.
Goes because they could use the variety today. There's probably 10 more out there than just AutoCAD. So you probably have to say it's got to be a DWG that's compatible with AutoCAD if that's what you want, because you're going to hand that off, like you're saying, electronically, because you don't want to be handing off paper drawings to the next architect. But the other thing is all the layering, the styles, the line types, all that kind of stuff that goes into drawings, that should be specified in there,
Perfect.
so that they know not only how to deliver it, but the next group knows how they are looking at it and how to deliver it back to you.
Is that a battle with the architect where it's like they think it's their work product?
You're two different things. I'm talking about just how to deliver it.
I get it.
Now the ownership of it, again, in that initial contract, it says they will be mine at the end of the project. They will try in the AIA. It says it's theirs, and that's where this thing starts.
Tying back. That's perfect. Yeah.
Imagine though, being a director of facility / construction / environment and care, / security / at a 150,000 square foot hospital. And let's say in the year you do 9 projects, but it's just you, and you got a secretary, and you got 150
guys.
Hospital,
three maintenance guys,
4 maintenance guys, right? And by the way, your maintenance guys are on call all the time because you're not staffing third shift or whatever it is, right?
Right.
You don't have that. That's where you've really got to put a plan together, and you've got to work it slowly to get these checks in place. Because we had a CAD person, right? So we could quickly tell if their architect was trying to get something over on us. Wait a minute, there's no layering in here.
Right.
Hey, there's no layering.
Wrong
Fix
line
that,
types.
right?
Yeah, the colors are wrong.
Right. And we had a document that specified what color, what the scheme, the naming schemes, and all that. Poor facility director over 150,000 square foot facility.
Yeah.
He's never going to check that until he has to, and then he figures out there's a problem, right? It's like, I need the drawings. He pulls them up. It's 3 months later. I got a problem.
Well, the other, and I'm getting way off the subject or the track here, but you walk into this 150,000 square foot or 300,000 square foot, take your pick, hospital that has been run by some maintenance guy as the director for the last 30 years who didn't understand any of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're walking in thinking you're going to have the drawings and, and you just have a pile of, I mean, I've walked into these facilities where you have a room behind the boiler room that looks like something out of a, horror picture. And in there is a stack of drawings in a box that he just kept putting more and more in over the years. I mean, it's just a nightmare. I mean, it's you got to pull it all out. You have to, and in a 150,000 square foot hospital, you're not going to get any resources to fix that.
Right.
So you're really between a rock and a hard place to get started.
And it's interesting too, because it frustrates the hell out of me, because these people are typically very hardworking.
Oh,
they're very responsive. They really care about the hospital, and the resources are not going to be dedicated. Even if one of the things that, he taught me and we always did was we were up front and ahead of what our cost should be. We spent time researching and educating the executives of the hospital. This was before he became an executive, of here's what your cost per square foot should be, right? Here's why. Here's where we fall from a percentile standpoint, right? Here's what we're doing to get better at that, right? If you're in a 150,000 square foot hospital,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we had millions of square feet, right? So that was another thing. We had scale,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Scale matters.
It matters
Because
a lot.
you can. We talked about this before too in one of our early podcasts. You can play with the dollars to get stuff where you can move it around. You got 150,000 square foot or even 300,000 square foot hospital. You got no wiggle room.
Mm-hmm.
Every dollar you have is going to something you have to have, and it's like, where do I get even $10,000 to have an architect come in and draw these drawings just for the life safety plans? Forget the fact that the mechanicals and all that are all over the board, and you're trying to do you're trying to take a wing and renovate a wing of this, 150,000 square foot, and none of them, stuff matches. So you're giving this pile of documents to these architects going to draw it, and the mechanical engineer and the electrical engineer, they're going to draw this new thing. And it's like, okay, I need all these little pieces. And, they're coming to you every day. Do you have the drawings from 1936 when they added this, mechanical system? Because I don't have it on the older drawings. Like, oh my gosh.
But if you do a couple $1 million worth of projects a year, and at a 150,000 square foot hospital, you probably are, having a project manager that's making 80 grand and then, add all in 100 grand, loaded rate, 100 grand, right? That person is going to save their salary 10 times over by making good decisions, making sure that the projects turn out the way they're on scope, schedule, budget, and quality.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It'll pay for itself over and over, but trying to get an administrator to understand that until there's a massive problem,
Right.
and it's too late, is very difficult to do.
Well, I'll tell one, maybe, what do you call these things these days? cheats or something. What do we call them out there in the world today? When you hack, one hack.
I'm like,
you,
I don't
you
know
are
where-
an influencer,
Yeah.
aren't you?
I'm like, I don't know where you're going, man.
There's a hack.
He got new language now and everything,
I'm trying,
right?
man. I'm trying.
It's come from his daughter.
Sure.
We know that's not you.
Dang it. I always try. It never works out. One hack that we did and was successful in some cases. It's harder the smaller you get, but it still can be done. If you're doing a couple $1 million worth of construction of some type, you build that salary of that project manager in those projects so it becomes capitalized.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay, and it's a weird way to do it because you have to figure out how to get that person paid because the salary's not going to be able to come out of the hospital. So you either load the project and have the project, the construction company pay your guy or gal that's going to be the project manager or something or some way, but there's ways to do it where it comes out of the project and you don't have this extra salary in your budget.
Nice.
So we've done that
Yeah.
successfully at various things, usually very large projects where you're like a 2-year project and you're going to have the whole salary paid for through the whole project, but there's still ways to do it. And if you have any kind of CFO, she's going to love you because you're not paying a salary, you're paying something out of the project.
We, a little bit different, but same philosophy. And this would work, I guarantee you, in a 150,000, 300,000 square foot hospital. Energy. Combine a couple of things. Do an energy assessment. Identify the small things you can do to get a huge return. Bake it in. I need a energy manager / project manager. Right. Now it's more difficult on you because you have to spend time. Say you get the project manager, but they don't know energy, or you get the energy manager and they don't know projects. So you have to spend time developing them, which can be frustrating sometimes, but it pays off in the long run.
Yeah.
And you'd be doing the work yourself anyway. So for a while, you're giving all the work to train the person on certain stuff, but eventually they're taking stuff off your plate.
Yeah.
I mean, it works out. It's hard. It's like, again, if you don't have these ideas on how to get there, that's more of the thing is there's ways to skin the cat that you don't think about because you've asked for this project manager and they say, nope, can't afford any more salaries.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you just feel, can't do it, done.
Yeah. So we talked about on the front end, how to buy out projects. I mean, obviously just touched on these things, right? But talked about contracts and being involved in that and specifications and then into as the project's going and, some different ways and stuff like that. And then we get to the point where we're looking at turning it over. And so you mentioned commissioning, right? Was one of the things you mentioned, right? Well, so I want to maybe talk about that for another minute here. And then also, you'd mentioned, hey, getting the right documents and making sure that, you're getting all those deliverables that you're supposed to be getting to help yourself. Because at this point, it's your baby then, right? So what are those things like that are just critical that you're looking to do and how to do it? Like, so you mentioned commissioning. So Mickey, you had said, hey, the guy that put the dampers in, don't let him check the dampers, right?
Well, what's interesting too is they're going to want to do that because they're going to charge you for it.
Right.
Yeah, that's a fee.
Yeah. So
there's a fee involved.
The money's there, so there's no reason not to bring in a independent.
Okay. So an independent
that works directly for the owner, right? So you get quality information.
So you build that into the budget that you're doing the commissioning, and you're paying that direct.
And the best scenario, if you can remember to get this started this way, is the commissioning agent starts with the project.
Yeah, it's not
because
that's another
quiver or arrow in your quiver as far as reviewing the documents as they're designing it to say, how is this going to work, and they have to commission this, and so they can come to you with ideas that, hey, you know what, they're doing this, and this, and that's not really going to work, or there's a better way to do that. So it provides you another resource if you get your commissioning agents right up there at the beginning. So there's
a whole bucket of things that you're doing direct, right? You're the one hiring the architect. You're doing all the special inspections that you have to do direct, right? You're doing commissioning. So there's these bucket of things, and you're just making sure that that's included in this.
Right. It's part of the budgeting project. We didn't talk much about that, but if you talk about the simple and keep it as simple as I can, around the steps of the project is idea, right? Somebody's got an idea. Okay, so then you have to turn that into a budget, right, of some kind. I don't know how you want to do that because there's a whole bunch of steps you could use. You could go to drawings first and then budget, or off the wall or something, but then you work through that and you get your architect hired and your contractor hired, and then you do the project, and then you're commissioning. So all those steps, there's many documents that show all of those things you fit into that process, but those things you want to have lined out in, just as you're describing, who's doing which things. And something you just asked about was things you want delivered to you at the end. Your commissioning agent is managing that, like all the submittals, all of the maintenance warranties, operating maintenance manuals, all that stuff.
List
that
of
commissioning
equipment.
is making sure they're all there, because he or she is managing all of that equipment going in, not managing, but overseeing it and seeing that it's going to work, and then all those documents come with it. So then at the end you have all these, unfortunately it's a whole bunch of paper. It can be all electronic, but your technicians are wanting access to it, so you got to figure all that out. How do you access all this stuff? But you have it all available for somebody sitting somewhere on a shelf that they can pull out something for this air handler or this water pump or whatever, so they can fix it or see what was their design intent and is it still working that way.
And you got to take the equipment that was installed in the project. You got to go to your CMMS system. You got to put it in your CMMS system. You got to do
That's
a risk assessment.
That's beyond commissioning too.
Yeah, you got to do a risk assessment to determine where it falls in the categories of maintenance. You got to take out.
So is that being done prior to the building being turned over, or right when you get it turned over, or like
kind
when
of concurrent kind of? Because you can do that after the building is turned over. During the commissioning process, now that we tie that in with commissioning, because the commissioning agent is going to give you all the details for whoever's managing your CMMS, computerized maintenance management system.
Yep.
To put all that stuff in there, but that's got to be connected. But it doesn't have to, it has to be there before it starts. It's within some reasonable time frame of the opening of the building. You have all that in your CMMS because there's timing of maintenance then.
Yep.
So,
yeah, like an example, a damper gets installed. The code, you gotta inspect it 1 year after installation, right? So you need to get it in your CMMS system,
right?
So you can get the reminder to go inspect that damper, right?
And some things are monthly inspections, right? Depending on what it is. So it has to be.
You added fire extinguishers,
yeah,
right? Exit signs,
yeah. So by and large, you have a 1 year warranty on everything, right?
You always get a 1 year warranty,
right?
Generally speaking. Yeah.
So at that 11.5 month mark, is it? Let's go walk the entire structure and find everything we can before our warranty's up, or is it?
Well, I didn't do it that way.
No, it was more. You could do, and I've never done this. You could do kind of a recommissioning towards that 12 month. So you see that everything's still working. Never done that. I can't imagine paying for that, but you could do it.
Yeah.
I mean, it would make sense in a way.
It's sort of like when your car warranty's getting ready to go out, right? It's like you better get it in there and
you rev the engine out in the
driveway. Go have someone.
That's actually. I never thought of that. I mean, the way that I approached it was, you're living in the space, you own the space, you're touching everything. Work orders are coming in, PMs are coming out. So if you don't have access panels, you're going to figure it out. If something's wrong with the doors, the undercut's wrong, you're going to figure it out. Now, you'll catch that earlier, but if you've got airflow issues, you're going to figure that out because your hot and cold calls are going to.
But you do have an original commissioning report that says it all worked.
Yeah.
Now I've talked about this with others about having a commissioning done, a recommissioning, but generally it was always because something was not working right in general. So you wanted to say, hey, this doesn't feel right. We got to recommission this. Something's not right.
Yeah, you got a problem. It seems.
But it was never, let's do the whole thing and check it all. But that'd be interesting.
Yeah, it seems systematic. Yeah, that's a good idea. I never thought of that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're bumping up against again. So maybe you guys, final thoughts on this topic, right? We've covered a lot in this session, the last one, and it feels like we still only scratched the surface.
Oh, we
right?
definitely scratched the surface.
So any just sort of parting thoughts to someone who's sitting there listening, and any words of wisdom there are? Come on.
I think anyone sitting out there listening to this if they're not long-term skilled facilities manager that's been doing this all along, they may be scratching and say, this is impossible. I mean, because this is overwhelming, because we're throwing things all over the place and we're loosely talking about this stuff. But there's enough resources out there. It takes time. Don't expect you're going to have all this wire in the first year of your new job at some facility, because depending on what they had when you got there, it could be a disaster for you. But you need to, I think the most important thing is those relationships, whether it's people outside, people inside, all of that are going to help you get where you need to go, and understanding, like Mickey did, with not realize he didn't know anything about mechanical systems, needed some background in that, and he got more familiar with it by hiring a guy to help him. Mm-hmm. Those kind of things, step by step, going through it and expecting that it's going to take time. My advice is start with defining what's missing in your group of stuff you need to do. Line it all out with like a list. I don't have anything on contracts. I don't have anything on this. I don't have anything. Figure that out and then make a plan to try to attack it. And maybe even the things I think I'm weak on. Like I don't know anything about electrical. Yeah. I need somebody that's going to help me with that, because this place always is suffering from trip breakers or something. I don't know.
Yeah, mine would be number one. Learn how to set expectations, reasonable expectations, with your CFO, COO, CEO. No, I don't mean tell them what to do. Like when a CEO says, "Hey, we just had somebody donate $500,000, and they want it spent on the children's unit, and she wants to walk with you through the children's unit and come up with ideas to do it." Put your best foot forward and help her do it. Don't tell her, "Well, we can't do that. Use it over here." Like, that's not gonna. That's a quick way to get you out on your ass, right? So, but I do mean when they say, "Hey, can you give me a price?" You got to say, "Listen, if you really need me to give you a number today, I'll give you a number, but it's going to be on a square foot basis on the high end of the range," and then let her know that. And it's going to. Now, the good news is it should get better as we do more work. And then if you go call your contractor friend and you say, top, square foot price, healthcare, $410 a square foot.
With a big contingency.
Right? So then, you go back to her. So once, learn how to set expectations. The second thing to me is keep it simple for yourself. So if it were me and I didn't grow up in this business with him, I would have stuck with design, bid, build. Because to me, that is slower, but it gives you an opportunity to learn all the phases of design. You walk through it, all the phases of the bid, and then you're very well versed before you actually get into the build part. Third thing, keep control as much as you can. I would divide up. I would not let the architect manage everybody, and I would not let the GC manage with everybody. I would have the architects reporting to me, GCs reporting to me, commissioners reporting to me, right? A lot of times the engineers fall under the architects, but we had them report to us sometimes. You're going to learn. It's more complicated, but you're going to learn more doing that. And then the last thing, and I think this applies everywhere in life, I think it's a blessing that I grew up understanding that I wasn't all that intelligent. Seriously, it got to the point where it didn't bother me. So I would go into a room and I'd go, "Huh? What? Wait a minute. Back up. Tell me what that is." And you have people look at you like you're an idiot. I don't care. I'm paying the bill. Explain it to me, right?
Yeah, like a first grader if it has to be, right?
Draw it on the board. I still don't understand, right? And just have that tenacity when you're sitting with an engineer, when you're sitting with an architect, when you're sitting with a GC. If they start going down roads and using terms you don't know, just say, "I got a question. What does that mean?" Right? And by doing that, they may smirk at you or whatever. They're not going to do it in front of you, but you learn. Mm-hmm. And then over time, guess what? You know more than everybody else in the room.
Yeah.
And I would add one thing to what Mickey just said about setting expectations inside the organization. One of the things we were able to do in the place where it was the best place we ever worked and where we had the most done, but we were also able to set expectations with that administrative team on the steps of the process and the timing. And we included them in those steps. So, he said design, bid, build. We tried to have them understand what that meant. And along the way, when do we get a price that they can be happy with to take it to the board or wherever? Or is it just a square foot price? And then I would be there at the board to explain it's a square foot price because we've done no design yet. Right. Setting those expectations that we didn't design, we didn't draw anything. We're saying we're taking this unit and turning it into this at $100 a square foot or whatever the number was that some contractor gave us, but we're just starting it now. We'll come back.
Sure.
And that kind of expectation was immensely successful for two really good reasons. It protected them, and it gave us the time we needed to do it right. And great projects.
Yeah.
And how you go about that is so important. If you're being obstinate with the person that you report to or their boss because you're worried about not having enough time and they're asking you for a number right now, if you become an asshole about it, it's not going to go well. But it will go well if you say, okay, typically I need this much time to give you an accurate number. But if you really need it today, I'm going to give you a number, but here's the risk. That's it, right?
Yeah.
The executives, they understand risk. They know. But
you give me that, I'm fine.
Right.
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 Yep.
I mean, 99% of the time they're really reasonable. I had, the 1% where, complete idiot, and it didn't work out well for them because they weren't just that way with me. That was just the way they operated, and then eventually they're gone.
Yeah.
Because they deal with doctors that way, and that don't go well.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
Yeah, that's good. Sweet. All right. Well, I think we're about to wrap it up. So for next episode, we got a couple topics we've been kicking around, but if you guys have something, let us know. We love taking feedback and stuff that you would like to hear. So, that's a
wrap.
That's a wrap.
Yeah. Thanks.
See ya.
Thank you for hanging out with us on FM After Hours. Make sure you follow us on all of our social media platforms for your regular dose of facility insights. As always, a big shout out to Remediate and Granger for their gracious sponsorships. Catch you next time on FM After Hours.